We're going to be speaking in a tick with Yvonne Adele. Now, Yvonne is a marriage celebrant, a fashion designer and owner of a speaking school, but she's probably best known as one of Australia's leading conference MCs and speakers. Welcome, Yvonne.
Hello, how you doing, Trev?
I'm very well, very well. Now, as we know, public speaking is a proven way to supercharge your personal brand, and you're the woman formerly known as Miss Megabyte. We might get into that in a minute, but you know, when it comes to public speaking, surveys show that one of our biggest fears is that public speaking is at the top of the list, and you always hear that thing that, you know, we fear public speaking, or getting up and standing in front of a group and talking is greater than the fear of death. It still permeates.
Yes, that's right. And that's because people get in their head too much. They think it's all about them, you see. But I've got a few little handy tips to get out of your head and to banish all nerves when speaking. And then it's not... I can give you that.
Well, we'll get into those tips, but let's just give us a little bit of a background on yourself, because as I said at the outset, you're a marriage celebrant, which is reasonably new. You're a fashion designer, which is even new, but you've been speaking for how long, and where's the Miss Megabyte for the, shall I say, the older members of our audience might remember Miss Megabyte.
Like you, okay. So I was a tech head who was working at Microsoft in tech support because I absolutely loved and was passionate about helping people to love their technology instead of hate it, throw it out the window. So from that, I decided to start my own consultancy, helping people how to learn how to automate technology and streamline it to make it less annoying, I suppose. So I caught the attention of a couple of the daytime TV shows and ended up on the Today Show doing like a regular weekly segment on technology, what was coming and what was happening and how to use technology to your advantage. So, you know, my nickname was Megabytes. And so on the Today Show, they started calling me Miss Megabyte. And yeah, that's how that sort of name was born, I suppose. From Miss Megabyte then, and as I started appearing on TV, as you can imagine, the sort of domino effect is that you then start getting asked to speak at conferences. So that's how I discovered the world of speaking, and that was about 22 or 3 years ago, and eventually I left TV behind just for speaking.
Right, so Miss Megabyte, what would it be now? A zettabyte, wouldn't it?
I actually have no idea.
All right, let's go with gigabyte. That sounds better. So you've been speaking for about 22 years, and you've done, you know, it's keynote speaking as well as MC work, but you've also running a speaking school, and you do teach people how to get over nerves. And I think that's how often do you see this affliction take hold of people? You know, if you ran into 10 people, how many of them would want to speak in public?
One.
Yeah,
probably about one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you know, as an MC, it's interesting because I'm the one that is standing with you in the wings just before I go out to introduce you to, you know, have you then go on stage. So I see this even more often now that I'm not just a keynote speaker who pops up, you know, 10 minutes before their talk and then leaves as soon as they're done, like your next guest, for example. So you know, I see it much more often, and I've discovered my 3 sort of top tips for getting over these nerves. First, it involves understanding that the talk you're about to do is not about you. You are a vehicle for the message. So if you consider yourself as simply the vehicle for the message to go through, then you start to take a step back from worrying about what if they're concerned about what I look like, what if they don't like what I'm going to say, what if they don't believe what I'm going to say. The fact is that you have already earned the right to be there on that stage, just by the fact that the person who chose you to be the speaker is the one, you know, that gave you that right. So the people in the audience have already put their trust in the conference organizer, the speaker, the business. So you have already earned the right to be there. So certainly that worry should go out the window. And then if you consider that you are a vehicle for the message, and that simply you are serving a message to this audience who is already looking up to you as the expert in that area of expertise. And then you got to do those classic mindfulness techniques. Just take a breath, remember your breathing. The amount of people I elbow in the ribs and go, hey, you're not breathing. And, remember your breathing. But I've got a great tip which I give to my brides and grooms and brides and grooms too when I'm as a celebrant, which works for speaking as well, is to wiggle your toes in your shoes. If you do it now, Trev, you wiggle your toes.
I'm wiggling.
All of a sudden, you come back to the present moment, and you stop going away with the fairies and worrying about what if and what if. You come back to the present moment. If you wiggle your toes in your shoes, it reminds you to start breathing. It brings you back to sort of being centered, I guess. And that's just a classic mindfulness technique, which works just before you're about to go on stage.
It's and I attest to the breathing. Before I go on stage, I take a really big breath, and I'm no different to anyone else. Where my background's public relations, and I guess I've been the person in the background for decades, and never being taking the front stage. And then as you do more miles in business, and you get asked to speak at conferences, and that's okay. But then from blogging and being on social media and having a book and things like that, you do get asked to speak. And you either embrace it or you don't, and it can take you on a whole different course, can't it? I mean, if you're running a business, and particularly if there's a thought leadership element to your business, and domain expertise, and demonstrating that expertise is an advantage and can give you an edge. Speaking can really help build your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, it's one thing to be an accidental speaker, just like that, where you fall into speaking and your content and your subject matter expertise relies on you to do the speaking that comes up as an opportunity. That's one thing. And if you are completely and utterly mortified and terrified of speaking in that instance where you've become an accidental speaker, then the other trick is to actually let the event know that you would like to be interviewed on stage by the MC or by perhaps another industry expert. And then all that interview is doing is just a conversation. And you can provide 5 to 10 questions that interviewer can use to draw the content out of you. And, that's a really easy way to just dip your toe into the water of speaking, because then you feel like you're up there with someone else just in conversation, and doing a keynote kind of flows on from that. But some people do often wonder, like, should they speak for free? Should they become a professional speaker and earn money for speaking? And really, as you say, it depends on your sort of business model. If you're speaking as a tool to funnel clients and prospective, say, readers for your book and your blog and all of that, if you're using it as a marketing tool, then absolutely you should be speaking for free at as many events as possible. But if the main part of your business model is that you are the expert of that area and you're known as the professional authority, then you would be a professional speaker earning money for that talk and not selling stuff afterwards.
And usually one will precede the other, isn't it? I mean, you've got to do the time, you've got to do your free talks,
Yep.
10, 20, 30, 40, I think I did 50 before I charged a fee. And
Yep.
it's small events too. I mean, I think we always think speaking and big audiences and everything, but sometimes, earning your chops at small meetups and things like that is a really terrific way to start. And it's about learning how to connect with an audience, isn't it?
That's exactly right, and it's sometimes people think, well, these are throwaway events and, I'll test my material out at these events, but you shouldn't disrespect them like that, actually. Every event, whether it's 10 people in, the local Rotary Club or a massive 1,000 person corporate event where you've been paid thousands of dollars, should be given the same amount of respect, because they are still relying on you for your insights and your expertise. And yes, the more talks you say yes to, the better you will become, just like any apprentice, I suppose.
Yeah. And just in terms of trying to get the best out of your speaking, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the worst things I've ever done was in the really early days was to learn a half-hour presentation by rote. I mean, it was the worst thing I've ever done. Yet you do hear people, they write out their script and they learn it. It takes a day longer to learn a script. Half an hour is a long time. And the problem I find when I did that, and I only ever did it once, is that if you forget one or two sentences, you're gone.
That's exactly right. And look, the number one thing that people want from any speaker on any stage is authenticity. And when you are reading a script from your mind, it's not authentic because you're not a professional actor. You know, you're not going to be putting all of that context and the subtext into your words. So you are robotically blurting out what you have learned, and what you're doing as well is thinking a few steps ahead to make sure that you haven't forgotten something. So you do become quite robotic. So what you should be, that's why PowerPoint, people don't love PowerPoint, and I don't love PowerPoint bullet points, but certainly using a PowerPoint slide presentation as an anchor with graphics and photographs and imagery and one big word or phrase on your slide, which are used as your sort of little discussion points. Those are your prompts, and that's all you need. You have to still remember, you are the expert in your area of expertise. You have earned the right to be there. You're not getting put on a stage to speak about something that is the person next to you's expert area. You are the expert already, so you already should trust your gut. And when you're creating a keynote presentation, it really should be only 3 things that you write down. The 3 main points you're going to talk about in that 10, 20, or 40 minutes, the 3 main points, and underneath each one of those, what 3 sub-points will you discuss? And that is how you write a keynote on a page, which I have actually done on a plane, say between Melbourne and Sydney when we used to go on planes. For an hour and a half. I could write a presentation in an hour and a half on one page by doing it that way. Then go start on the PowerPoint and create the graphics that back up those points, because you could riff on all those bullet points with no problem because you are the expert.
And that's 3 main headings and 3 subheadings under each one of those, and to let that flow. And
that's what I think.
What about people having little, not cue cards, but those little systems cards in their hand to refer to them? Is that acceptable, or is it's not seen to to be professional?
Absolutely acceptable. It is, because if that's what you need as a person to get your talk done and to be the best version of you on stage, then it's acceptable. That's what deems it to be acceptable. Have a look at Sama, who's coming on next after me. Sama has a really cool printout of the notes pages of his slides, which gives him a little thumbnail of each slide, and he's written maybe 1 or 2 words in analog version with a pen and on his piece of paper that he writes right up to the very last minute before he goes on stage, because he's taking into account the current news, what's happened today and yesterday, the current vibe at this conference, what the last couple of speakers said, what he's chatted to people in the audience about. So he writes a couple of notes next to those little thumbnails, and he refers to it every sort of 6 or 7 minutes, so that he can make his talk more dynamic. So anything is acceptable as long as you are not reading printed words typed out like a script.
Or PowerPoint bullet points. That's a big no-no.
Yes.
Don't do that. Don't be that person.
No bullet points allowed.
Sama, as you're talking about, will be Steve Sammartino, one of Australia's leading futurists and keynote speakers, coming up shortly. I just wanted to take back before about having some notes. This is not what we're talking about, being on the stage and presenting a keynote, or telling your story or getting your message out there. But this is not a speech where you sit behind the lectern and you read the speech. That's obviously a different thing.
Look, it is, but I still don't go for standing behind a lectern and reading a speech either, like politicians do, that someone else has written the speech and they haven't even looked at it, the person who's actually presenting the speech, delivering the speech, and the first time they ever look at it is while they're reading it. I mean, that is not authentic. And so if you are going to be standing at a lectern and reading from a page, it should be on the bullet points only, not the ones up on the screen, but they should be prompts, not a script.
Yep. And just one last question, Yvonne. Do you, like for entrepreneurs that, get the bug and they're out there speaking, and maybe it's at the start to build their business, their profile, their personal brand, and that path, but some entrepreneurs and business owners, they actually become really good at it, and they want to make it a little bit more of maybe a sideline gig where they actually get paid. Do you actually need a speaking agent to get gigs these days?
No, you certainly don't. There's a couple of ways to get gigs, to get more speaking engagements. One is to use Google Alerts. So Google Alerts is something I've used ever since I first discovered it, maybe 10 or more years. That look up speakers who are similar to you, speakers who you would like the gigs that they are getting, or you would be a good complement to the gigs that they're getting, and set up a Google Alert so that you find out which conference programs they are being put on as soon as those programs are published online. Now, you might have certainly missed the chance to put your hat in the ring for that conference this year, but now you've got an idea of which conferences you should be pitching for next year, because they're usually annual conferences. So that works really, really well for me and always has. As far as wanting to speak at events that, say you're a regular at a certain event and you think, gee, I really should be up on that stage, then what you should be doing is attending that event regularly, interacting in the groups and any other sort of activity where you can show your expertise to the organizer, and then create a video, just a piece to camera video where you are demonstrating your chutzpah, I suppose you could say, and pitch yourself on video to that conference organizer, and you can absolutely bet you'll get their attention, because they love anything that's a little bit different like that. Now, as far as agents and bureaus go, just forget about a speaking agent and forget about the speakers' bureaus when you're starting out. As soon as it's relevant for you to be using them as a distribution channel, they will tap you on the shoulder. Okay. You will not have to go and find them.
They will find it. Inbound marketing, they will come to you.
Yeah.
Build it and they will come. Terrific stuff.
Yes.
Great practical tips there. And hopefully there's some viewers out there who have been wanting to take that next step about getting up on the stage and getting their message out there, their story and their message. And there's no more powerful way, I don't believe, than from a stage in a speaking gig. Thank you, Yvonne. Where can people find you? What about the speaking school?
Yeah, so if you find me on Twitter, Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn, just Yvonne Adele, Yvonne with a Y, I will post the links in just a moment for you.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Have a good day.
Thank you, you too. Bye.
Bye-bye.